Setting up ECC DIal lists. Okay, we're going to look at how to set up ECC DIal lists in ShoreTel. A couple things you need is the database to create it. So we're going to use MySql Community Edition, just downloaded from the website. User interface to add and create the database and tables. You can do it from command line, but for this purpose, we're going to use a tool called SQL Yog. So the first thing we need to do is configure a remote database. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to bring over my remote database, and I'm going to just do it all from the install. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to run the MySql installer. I'm going to pause this during the installation just so that and stop it on relevant parts. So I'm going to let this run in the background. Okay, from here I'm going to select install MySql products. I'm going to skip this piece. And I'm going to set up just server only. Next. Just going to basically hit next, next, next until it finishes. I'm going to hit next. Next. Okay, I'm just going to call this a server machine. And it's going to default to port 3306. Leave all the defaults here. Okay, we're going to add the SQL root password. We're just going to make something basic. Change me. Shows you as a weak password. And then the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a user account for the remote access. So what we're going to do is I'm going to add a user, and I'm going to call the user as dial list, and the password is dial, D-I-A-L, D-I-A-L. Hit OK. Next. Run as a system account. Next. Let it finish. Hit next. It failed adding a firewall rule, but I'd already added that firewall rule, so it was already in the system because I've already done a previous installation. So now that I got that database connected, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open SQL Yog, and I'm going to create a new entry, which is called dial list. Hit OK, and I'm going to put in I can do my root, but now I'm going to do is I'm going to try my user account, dial list, dial. It's 3306. Let's test the connection. And it works. So now I'm going to save that connection and I'm going to connect. Okay, so now we were connected into the database. The next thing we're going to want to do is we're going to have to add a table. So we go in and we say right click, create database. And we're going to call this dial list DB and hit create. Okay, now we're going to go into tables and we're going to go create a table. And we're going to say the table name is going to be customers. And we're going to add the column name. We're going to say company. It's going to be a variable varchar, the variable character. And let's say that it's 20 characters long. We're going to say phone number. And we're going to make that a varchar as well. We're going to make that 20 characters, just default. Now we could put anything else in, but really we want either the customer name or their first or last name. We're going to use company here because if you're calling a company, you'd want to see the company name that you're calling. So I'm going to hit save. Table created. Okay. Now I'm going to go into this table. And I'm going to look at the table data. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add information. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and I'm going to put in company. We'll call it LANtelligence. And then we say the phone number is 905-822-6654. And then we'll call it test co. And we'll call it 1-866-510-8547. And we're going to save that. Okay, so now we got our database and our table. And now we want to look at our contact center. So now we go over to our contact center. So we've configured the remote database. We set up username and password on the database. We're going to test connectivity. We're going to load the remote database sample data. Now we're going to test the Odbc connection. So I'm now going to go over to our contact center database. Now the one thing you need to figure out and find out, with this on the screen, is that the contact center is a 32-bit application. So you can't use the 64-bit Odbc connector that comes with a 64-bit machine. So what you want to do is you want to look for a program called Odbc AD32. Okay, I can open that up, and that's the 32-bit Odbc drivers. When you flip over to the system DSN, you're going to see in the file system DSN, this is actually the 32-bit one. Sorry, that's the 64-bit one. If I just open the 32-bit one here, what you'll see is the system DSNs. So the difference is if I just open the Odbc connector on 64-bit, what you're going to find is you're going to get nothing. So system DSN, file DSN has nothing in it. But if you actually open the Odbc AD32, it's going to bring up all your loaded drivers. Now what we want to do is we want to create a driver. The nice thing that ShoreTel does, it already puts a MySql driver, so MySql connect. So I'm going to hit add, and I'm going to choose at the very bottom, and this is, SQL Server, Microsoft Office, and then I'm going to hit MySql Odbc Shoreware driver or contact center driver, and I'll hit either one. I'll hit finish. Now it's going to ask me to put in the information here. So now I'm going to do here is I'm going to put the data source name, which is going to be dial list data source name DSN, the address 192.168.4.40, port 3306, and the user is going to be dial list, password is dial, and the database I'm going to put in is customers. I'm going to test this, and this is going to test remote connectivity from the ECC. Connection failed, unknown database. Now I just do double check to see what my database name was. And it was called dial list DB. Of course it was wrong. So the database is going to be, and it actually lists it down here. Come on. We'll delete it out. We'll just type dial list DB, and we'll give it a test. Connection successful. So now we remotely connected to that database. Now we're good. So we hit OK, and now the connection is set up in your ECC. Now what else do we have on our list? We want to test remote connectivity, which we did. The other thing we can do too to test if query works is we can go into our contact center, and I'm going to open up the GCCS tool, the graphical call control scripts tool. I already have it running. Okay, so the easiest way to test your scripts, and I already have one here, I'm going to delete it. Okay, I'm going to add a new script. New script. I'm going to go over to the objects, and then I'm going to say SQL execute. So I'm going to just drag the SQL execute on here. When I highlight it, it's going to give me the actual parameters. The nice thing I can do here is I can actually go in, if you see on the right-hand side, I can choose the dial list DSN, which I don't technically have because I haven't created it. And then I can actually go and run the query here. So what we need to do is I need to go into the contact center now. And I need to open the contact center back up. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the contact center. I'm going to open up the contact center. Internet Explorer. Show the contact center on here. Anyways, there we go. The contact center page. Okay, we're going to log in. Right. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually go to maintenance. And I'm going to look at system parameters first. I'm going to look at external interfaces. And then when I drop down the external interface, I'm going to look at database connections. This is where I'm going to set up the Odbc connection. And that was one I previously did, so I'm going to delete that out so we can start fresh. I was already using the connection. So let's create a new one. So I'm going to create new, and I'm going to call this, just call it my dial list connection. Okay. I hit refresh, and you'll see that there's a dial list DSN, which we created. So it auto-populates it. So I go into my dial list DSN, which is what we just created. It's MySql. I'll put the username as dial list. Password is dial. Hit create. Now it's created that connection. Now what I can do is, now that I created that connection, I can go into my GCCS scripts. Okay, and I should see down here that I have my dial list connection. Okay, so now there is the DSN, or data source name, set up. So now what I want to do is I'm going to say select star from customers. And if I want to test it, I can actually right here and click test. And it's going to pop up a window that's going to do the query. So basically it tells you select star from customers, LANtelligence, and testco. And those are the exact same results as we just added into the database. Okay, so we know that that works. So we close that. So now we know our ECC can connect to it. So we got the data source name connected. We got the ECC connected. Now the next step is we have to configure the ECC. Okay, so as far as connecting the ECC to create the dial list, we are done.